We made this.
Engage.
I'm Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise.
Michael Burnham, pleased to meet you.
What we leave behind is not as important as how we've lived.
We will continue exploring, discovering new worlds, new civilizations. That is the United Federation of Planets. That is Starfleet.
Make it so.
Hello everyone and welcome to Make It So, a Star Trek Universe podcast. My name is Kurt North and I am your host today for our coverage of Star Trek Discovery. And on this particular episode, we are looking at Season 1, Episode 13, which is What's Past Is Prologue, and that aired on the 28th of January in 2018. It was written by Ted Sullivan and directed by Olatunde and Asunami. Hopefully I've got that right. And this episode sees the last one to feature the Mirror Universe, and it involves the key players of Burnham, Lorca, and Giorgio. And to speak to me about this episode today is returning guest, best-selling author Una McCormack. Una, how are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm not doing too bad. So this universe of pandemic and COVID-19 situation has certainly been an interesting one. I've managed to do quite a few podcasts in the time, as well as working. I know that we've spoken just off air there that you've been quite busy in other realms, but how have you been? How have you found it?
Do you know, it hasn't differed that much from my day-to-day life, because if you're a writer, pretty much what you have to do is sit in a room by yourself and write. And you think of all sorts of different ways to not do that, which might involve, going for a cup of tea or going for a walk. But I'm actually quite lazy as well, so I don't do those things very much. So pretty much it's not been very different. The big difference is that my 6-year-old daughter obviously has been at home, so she's not been able to go to school. So that's kind of altered the time I have available. But I've quite enjoyed it, to be honest, because I'm the kind of person who thinks, I've got to go out. I've said I'll go and do X, Y, and Z. I wish I hadn't agreed to do it. Right. And now I've got a really good reason to do it. Sorry, there's a global pandemic on. So fortunately, everyone, a few friends have been ill, but nobody in my family's been ill.
That's good to hear.
Everyone's been fine. So joking aside, we've been really, really lucky. So, my mum is 90. Her part, she's the same as me, actually. She was meant to be having a big 90th party, right. And we had to cancel it. And she was like, thank God. I don't have to talk to anyone. So we've been fine. We've been absolutely fine. Yeah. Bit too much work with homeschooling, but you juggle everything. So
I can imagine.
By. Yeah.
So I was lucky that I had my 40th birthday in February, so I managed to have a party just before all of this kicked off. And I've mentioned before on the podcast and elsewhere that I'm still at work as well, so I'm in a really weird situation where it's talking to people who have not necessarily yourself, but talking to people who are used to working full time and getting their stories back off them and trying to work out, I don't know what it's like to be in your shoes because I've been working throughout. So that's really interesting. Have you, with anything as well, have you been taking some of the stuff on board that's been happening around and jotting them down for any of your future books or any ideas that you've popped up at all? Or?
I think it's going to take a long while for us to process it. To get past global pandemic. The one thing I did start doing was I started a tiny letter, which is, these sort of maybe 800 word sort of short posts. And it's not quite a blog because it's not archived. You have to kind of subscribe to it. I've been trying to do that once a week because I thought I'd actually quite like some of I'd like a sort of archive of what I was thinking about and what was preoccupying me. And it's been a good discipline. I kind of sit down for half an hour on a Sunday night about 9 o'clock at night and just throw down. Right, I'm just gonna write for half an hour and get something down. I've got some topics kind of lined up. Throw that down. People can subscribe to it and hear me bang on. That's been the sole thing I did. I picked up my diary again But I find diary writing it's a bit hassle, doing handwriting. Whereas this is just a really, really good way of sort of throwing down ideas. So that's been a difference. That's been a change. But insofar as writing about a pandemic, I don't think I could do it there. Having said that, one of my very favourite writers, science fiction writer called Lois Spitmaster-Bujold, who I've just finished co-editing a collection of essays about her. She's put out a novella about a pandemic. She in a series that an ongoing series she does of novellas, ebooks. She's started and published one, and it's absolutely brilliant. So some people are responding straight away, but I think it'll take me a little while to sort through. And lots of other people as well. I think if you got something out, her novella's great, but I think most of us, we'd hurry something out, it would be bad.
And it's one of those things as well. I think processing takes a while, doesn't it, to really be objective about things and how you actually process it in your head and may spout up other things. But well, just before we start going into the episode that we're here to talk about, I just wanted to touch upon the book that you have written for Discovery in the Tilly book, and The Way to the Stars, and obviously the Picard book, because they're very two different types of books in a lot of ways. That Tilly is a fairly new character to the show, to Star Trek as a whole, but you had Picard, who's got this massive history behind him, and also the fact that you had to write for a particular situation. How do you find the differences between that kind of writing with the way that you approach, say, the Way to the Stars and Star Trek Picard? What the kind of differences you approached for that?
Absolutely. The big difference to me was really quite a practical one, in that when I came on board to do a Discovery book, season 1 had already gone out. Yeah. So we had a really good idea of the tone of the show, the feel of the show. We had a good idea of what Tilly was like. I'd seen the performance. It was part of the reason I wanted to do the book. Yeah. It's like, yes, give me the book, give me the book. But with Picard, obviously we knew Jean-Luc Picard, but I came on as the show was still in production. So even though we knew Picard, we perhaps didn't know him so well at this stage in his life, after this big change in his life. And of course, there were lots of the new characters that I had to get to grips with. Yeah. And we hadn't heard their voices. I was getting scripts through, but I hadn't seen any footage, because firstly it was very locked down, and secondly it was, they were cutting and editing, it's still filming. So I had to kind of go off, and I'd seen Alison Pill in things, and see what the other characters were like. Of course, not all of them appear in the book, so that was the big practical difference, I think. And I already knew from the guys who had done the first Discovery books just what an interesting and strange experience it was to write a book alongside a show at that stage. So I was kind of a bit pre-prepared. So very, very different. That I think was the chief difference. Tilly, well established. Yeah. The show was established. Picard, even though we knew him, I had to kind of pick up something new. This was a new show, which made it very interesting. Yeah,
it's interesting, because you'd almost think it would be the other way around, but of course, because Picard has been away for so long that we just weren't sure where they were. And I know that you were getting the scripts and stuff, but it's the the actual development that Patrick Stewart was wanting to get involved and change the character as well. I can see that being quite difficult.
And it wasn't I always try to bear in mind, it wasn't a Star Trek The Next Generation novel. Yeah. It was a Star Trek Picard novel. It was a TV tie-in to Star Trek Picard, not to one of the earlier Treks. Yeah. And the show was going to have its own distinctive tone and feel and themes, and it had to be congruent with those. So, I'd done this before with one of my Doctor Who books. I'd written one of the first Jodie Whittaker novels. So you kind of, we hadn't seen the companions there. You're kind of flying a little bit seat of your pants, but that's what you've been hired for. So you just kind of get on with it. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I think we'll talk about this episode that we're here to talk about today, following in our series that we've been going through and following season 1 of Discovery just before season 3 does come out. And I think I saw from a tweet from an editor the other day saying that we're pretty much finished with it. So fingers crossed it'll be out soon. But I think the first thing I would like to ask is about Discovery as a whole. What are your general thoughts on season 1 of Discovery, and in particular this episode, especially given this episode could almost feature as a finale to a season in some ways? We do get the extra 2 episodes come after this, but what was your first impressions of season 1, and then obviously this episode in point?
So I've rewatched Discovery, the whole of Discovery, recently, sort of a few months ago. I thought I'm going to sit down and watch it start to finish, and I had found season 1 quite difficult to get into at the start. I found it. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. There's a lot of stuff in Klingon. Yeah. I think the first couple of episodes, you're thinking I could probably do not have to read the subtitles so much. My recollection of watching the first season of Discovery was that there's a real whiplash feel to it. You feel you've got one story and then you've got another. So I was, you kind of think, oh, were we talking about tardigrades a few minutes ago? Yeah. But then when I rewatched it, and I loved season 2 just to kind of get that one tied off. But when I rewatched it recently, I thought actually there's a lot more coherence in this from the start than I had realised. I think we all know the production stories and people kind of coming and going and all these sorts of things. So I had been expecting to see that kind of whiplash again. And in fact, watching it back, once I knew where the story was going, there was a lot more kind of stuff in the earlier episodes that I knew was going to be paid off in later episodes. So I was really pleasantly pleased to see how well it pulled together. I think the speed of it is really, really marked. It just bangs through story. Yeah. And I think this is something we can come to when we talk about this episode. It's pushing through and through and through and through. You think how stately, I think, something like Next Generation can be. It's quite, it's very theatrical. It's still very theatrical. And even with Deep Space Nine, even though you've got these, it's across the background of a major intergalactic war, when you kind of watch Deep Space Nine, it is people standing in a room. So, all my favourite stuff with kind of like the bunker on Cardassia Prime, ultimately it's down to 3 actors delivering lines to each other, Damar Wayun, the founder. And the genius is that somehow they make you feel that this is in a time of war. You feel all this is happening in the background. But what they're able to do in Discovery is put that on screen. You're always getting the visuals. You're always getting the pace, the speed. And that's the big change for me with Discovery. I had to rewatch Voyager quite recently as well, just in a book about Janeway. I kind of sat through Voyager again. And I think you see that transition happen, because by the end, Voyager just looks amazing. Yeah. It looks really, really, really good. And it's like you've made the transition from, three actors in a room to a starscape, spaceship, cityscape, and you see that happening in Voyager. And I think when we come to Discovery, we've absolutely made that change. Yeah. And this episode, I think, kind of epitomizes that, doesn't it?
It does. It does. Yeah. I mean, I think Voyager's an interesting case in point. I know that I think it was Brian Fuller. I might be putting words in his mouth here, so I'm not entirely sure if it was him. But they were talking about the year in hell recently, saying that they wanted that to be a full season, and the execs pulled back on that. Yeah. But around that time, around the Scorpion era and the Year of Hell stuff, that's when I felt that Voyager really started to kick in, really. And I see what you're saying with the rediscovering Discovery as it happens, because Tony and I have both spoken about this recently, where I was more. I think I'm more fond of season 1 than Tony is, but. Even myself, I've got certain issues, and actually I'll touch upon them on this episode, to be fair. But there was that cohesion. There does seem to be more cohesion when you can step back from it and not seeing it week on week and not necessarily binge it, but know the story and then just have time to relax and watch the story.
Exactly that.
It feels more in keeping. So what about this episode then? Because this is the fourth episode of us being in the mirror universe. First of all, do you think that choosing the mirror universe was a good start, or a good thing to do with the whole Lorca arc, and the conclusion? So what are your general thoughts are on this particular episode when it relates to where Voyager is, where Discovery is at this moment in time?
Well, there was a funny one too. As I say, I'd rewatched The Lot quite recently, or a couple of months ago, maybe a bit longer. And then to kind of pluck this episode out and kind of turn it on and watch it cold, you kind of go, whoa, where are we now? Okay. Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. No. Are we in the tardigrade end of the season, or are we in the other bit of the season? So you're straight in, aren't you? You're absolutely straight in with the mirror universe, and I love all that. It's absolutely complete nonsense, but it's my kind of complete nonsense, and I think they what I liked about this episode, and I think that they this sort of ties back to what I was talking about with the bunker scenes in Deep Space Nine, is that you do have these it's a massively overly grandiose setting of the Terran Empire, and the bronze breastplates, and all the strutting around, and the casual violence and this kind of thing. But the story actually turns on the relationships of a very small number of people, on Lorca's relationship to Georgiou, on Burnham's relationship to both Georgious, and the betrayals. Burnham's betrayal predates her experience of the mirror universe. It comes from Prime. It comes from the person that she always was. The act of treachery is not a mirror universe treachery. So actually the episode is sort of, and of course you've just got this kind of non-stop action happening as well. So watching the episodes going, wow, this is kind of really frenetic. It's kind of banging from scene to scene to scene, to twist, to moment, to spin, to da-da-da. But all of it is underpinned, I think, by this triangle of relationships. And then you've got kind of the peripheral ones. You've sort of got Burnham's growing trust in Saru and vice versa. You've got Tilly and Stamets. You've got Landry and Lorca. So it's like you've got these little sort of satellite characters going on, but this central betraying each other again and again, or and even the last betrayal is sort of Burnham bringing Georgiou back, and Georgiou's like, what the hell have you just done to me? How could you possibly have thought I would want this? So once you realise that you've got all this sort of pomp and circumstance going on, but the centre is this very tight dynamic, it becomes quite an interesting episode to watch, I think. What did you think?
You do. I mean, I'm probably a little bit opposite to you. I'm not a fond of the mirror universe in any form, in a lot of ways. But I will give the due to Discovery. I think Discovery has enough nuance within it that I can live with it. And I was wondering when I did my rewatch here whether or not I would be more fond of the mirror universe or less. And I'm probably about the same, but I do slightly like it more than I thought I would do. But that being said, I agree with you. The actual questions I've got lined up here very much relate to what you're saying. And I'm sure we'll go through them with the likes of, Lorca and Burnham and Georgiou and Lorca and everything else in between, and including Saru, because Saru's I think is really important from a season point of view more than anything else. And it's as you say, it's frenetic. There's a lot going on. There's jumps everywhere. And I actually quite liked it. It's a bit of, as you say, a bit of pompousness, but the mirror universe for me, I've always had an unusual relationship with that. The Star Trek original series ones, I've been open and said that I haven't really watched them, but the Deep Space Nine ones are where I have focused in, and being a person who grew up on Next Generation, it was Next Generation for me until DS9 came out. So when DS9 came out, the mirror universe was very much like, oh, this is interesting. Not sure I like this. And that's where I formed it, whereas Next Generation obviously doesn't have it. So
no, not at all. I remember in the years before I watched Deep Space Nine. That's a story I've told. My being kind of dragged screaming to Deep Space Nine. I was a massive Blake Seven fan. Don't you? You look too young to me to remember Blake Seven. But a friend said to me, why did you not watch Deep Space Nine? Because it's basically Blake Seven. And I went, okay, all right, she didn't. And when they go into the mirror universe, it actually is Blake Seven. So you kind of look at it and you go, yeah, actually, that sort of high camp fascism. It's absolutely on the nose with Blake. So I think I was predisposed to be fond of them,
right? Yeah.
Just because, and there's flaws. I don't like the kind of nasty Garrick and that kind of thing. So I think I sort of, and what I really enjoy about the Mirror Universe episodes is I really enjoy watching actors have a fantastic time chewing scenery. My God, are they chewing the scenery? Jason Isaacs is finally let loose. But I think I think you could really easily play these parts badly. And they don't. They both of them, Lorca and Georgiou, they just drain it in. So these people are plausibly products of this society, and simultaneously I think they're playing up the kind of the carnival and the overstated nature of it. So he comes on, Lorca comes on, you're practically booing him, like this sort of thing. But at the same time, I'm watching, going, oh God, that's a fine figure of a man.
No, I agree with you on that point, purely because the way that even towards the end of the episode, where Georgiou has a bit of affinity to, a bit of empathy to Burnham, and the character's drawn in a little bit because of the way that she's like, you've done well, kind of thing, carry on what you're doing. And Lorca's coming from a 3 or 4, 5 episode arc of pretending to be one person and not being another, but having this connection with Burnham, which he can't seem to shake. So that's what I think I mean by the nuance of it. It makes more sense to me, whereas a lot of other ones sometimes may have felt a bit too cartoonish in that way.
And it reminds me of that thing that Quark and Garrick say to each other about, there's something about the Federation, and it's like the root beer. You think, and then you realise that you've tasted the forbidden fruits and you can't get enough of it. So it's like they've both been affected by Burnham. But at the same time, and it's almost the most interesting relationship to me is the Lorca Landry one. Yeah. He's come back for her. They're loyal to each other. Yeah. She's loyal to him. He's loyal to her. So even in this kind of corrupted version of the world of the world that we're familiar with, there's still ties of loyalty to each other. Yeah, that's an interesting kind of doubling with his relationship with Burnham, I think. Yeah, well, that lines us up perfectly to the beginning of the episode as well, because it begins with the reveal that it begins with the end of the last episode, effectively, because we only just find out Lorca is of this universe. And he starts to rally the troops. They're all in the agonizing booths and stuff, which I think is a lovely addition to the way that they play that, and the style that they use. I think it works really well. So he's bringing back all these people. They say Landry. Landry isn't that different to the Landry we met in the previous earlier in the previous season with the Prime timeline. Landry. But it is interesting how we now find about the Ion Storm with Lorca's transportation in there. And Lorca, to this point, I can see that you're obviously a Lorca fan, but we do get this is the final showpiece for Lorca. So I think we'll maybe talk about Lorca just as himself for the time being, because we do see the end of Lorca here. But what did you make to his arc up until here? Because he's played it so well. We've discussed this on other podcasts earlier in the season, just how good Lorca is and how much people would want him to be a Prime timeline captain and those sort of things. Absolutely. And stuff. I think it's a real if they don't get a Prime Lorca at some point, they're missing a trick, I think, because it's so and what a great part. I mean, I would watch Jason Isaacs read the phone book, obviously. I think it'd be absolutely fine. And he plays one of my very favorite set of novels is a set of novels by Kate Atkinson. They're the Jackson Brodie novels. They've been dramatized as case histories. Right. He plays Jackson Brodie in them. Jackson Brodie has been written as a woman writing a male character that women want to read. Yes, so she's gone, ladies, I am delivering you kind of slightly tormented handsome man for you to kind of pat on the head, and it's absolutely brilliantly conceived, and he plays it absolutely brilliantly. And then what he's done with Lorca is just, Oh, I just love it. It's just it's very, very watchable. It never slides over into. He always manages to rein it back. It never goes into full blown pantomime. There's always that edge of it.
Yeah.
Because that's the culture he's from. It's this people prancing around, sort of, giving each other grandiose titles. But he always manages to pull it back to something completely plausible. It's really, really hard to do this kind of stuff. And you see it in Trek all the time, people weighed under by latex and makeup and just doing something in their performance that makes the situation completely believable. It's really, really skilled. So I love Lorca's arc. He's very decorative and very watchable, but also I think that kind of I didn't see it coming. Yeah. And I'm always happy. I read and write a lot of stories and watch a lot of stuff, so I'm always pleased. A lot of the time you can go, I saw that. You see that coming a mile off. I didn't see this coming, and it was great. But goodness, yes, prime Lorca. We have got to. We've got to see. Because you kind of go, well, what would be core? Yeah,
what would be different?
Would he turn out to be absolutely a stuffed suit, or would we find that kind of vein of corruption runs through the man? Yeah, and it's core to the man rather than to the civilization that he's grown up in. So I'd love to see how they played that.
Yeah, it would be interesting.
Yeah, we'd get him back, which would be great. But in the meantime, we kind of have Anson Mount to look at. So,
and well, in theory, depending on where they go with Strange New Worlds, it could be Prime Lorca could appear depending on where the timeline fits. Yeah, because of its pre-discovery,
we have no certainty. Do we? I can't remember now. We don't know whether he's. Yeah.
No.
We don't know.
Well, apparently, or did we have a switch? Did they switch with the transporter on the Ion Storm? I don't know, potentially, but even so, that's during Discovery's era. So, Star Trek, but depending on where Strange New Worlds picks up from, it might well be pre-Discovery. So that'll be good to see.
There's a great show that people might really enjoy that we've just, my other half and I have just been watching, called Counterpart, which has got J.K. Simmons in it, who I'm sure people know from tons of stuff. But that kind of has a kind of mirror universe. It's about a parallel world running alongside us, and he has to play two versions of himself. Right. And oh my God, honestly, it's one of those things where you go, actors are just magicians. You kind of go, you're in no doubt which one of these two men is on screen, and then I'm not spoiling plots, kind of this kind of thing, then they have to switch, so you've got one version having to pretend that he's the other one, so he's got to act one of them acting that he's the other one, and so you got all the it's a terrific series. I think we were watching it on Amazon. I think we did have to shell out there, but I absolutely recommend it. Anyone who likes that kind of slipstream science fiction, and watching an actor having to do all these kinds of things, it's absolutely great. So yeah.
Well, I think I'll definitely look into that. I think I've heard of it. I haven't watched it though, so it's something. I've just been rewatching Russian Doll as it happens recently. That's really good.
Oh, great choice.
So it's a really good film.
I've got to rewatch that one. Yeah.
So Lorca, because his arc, as you say, his character literally walks the line between the two universes, because you can imagine him being in both, and he struggled through the past 5 or 6 episodes because of where he is. There's been little nods. I don't know if as you watched it the second time around, how that informed your viewing of it, because knowing what you know, it's obviously nice to see the aspects where Lorca's saying, I don't give a damn about Starfleet regulations, I just want you to do it. Those little things that kick in. But the one thing he does seem to have is an affinity for, as you say, for Landry, but especially for Burnham. And that is pretty much ends up being his downfall. So what do you make of the Burnham-Lorca relationship, and especially Lorca and his desire to get what he once had with Burnham?
It's interesting from Burnham's perspective, because he's clearly her route back in. And, he wants her. He wants her on the ship. There are lots of good reasons for this. But to her, it must seem, well, this is the door that's cracking open that means I'm not going to be spending the next 100 years kind of, stuck in jail. So it's like the door cracks open for her. But the door is a sort of door to compromise and darkness. And I feel what's in Burnham's mind, I think she's got this sort of terrible dilemma where she simultaneously feels that she's been true to herself and true to her principles, but knows that what she did was bad. And this is the sort of door that opens that says, well, maybe you can reconcile these things. Maybe you can sort of put these ghosts to rest or lay them to rest. But of course, it isn't really a true offer. It's it's a door to perhaps further corruption. But she keeps on. She's a very interesting character. Yeah.
Yeah. And then on the flip side as well, that the affinity that Lorca has and almost has a desire, he wants her to happen, because there's a point in the episode where they're on level 3 and he tries to attempt to ask her to join him. And you've seen all these video screens, which I think is brilliantly edited and directed those scenes. But then if he eventually finds out, because Landry's after her, that she's actually rerouted stuff, and that almost feels to Lorca like it's a betrayal, even though he hasn't necessarily been betrayed by her. It's the other way around, but he still thinks there's a chance to bring her into the fold for him. And I think that's really interesting dynamic between the two of them. I thought we had an understanding, but he's misread the draw that is Georgiou. That it doesn't matter that it's not her Georgiou; it is a Georgiou, and so to redeem herself for what she did is always going to be the most important thing to her. When it comes to a choice between him and her, it's only ever going to fall one way, and he can't quite believe it. Yeah, exactly. We're moving on to Burnham and Georgiou then, because again, as you say, there's this push and pull between Lorca and Burnham and Georgiou. Lorca has a mission. His mission is to defeat Georgiou and their relationship. But they are pretty much fighting over Burnham in a lot of ways, as you've alluded to there. But the actual Georgiou and Michael's relationship in this one's really well defined as well, considering we've only got whatever it may be, 40 minutes of screen time. We get to spend quite a bit of time with Georgiou and Michael in close quarters, especially obviously during the absurd Kelpian meal, which was particularly bad. So it is a coming together. It's relating to what happens in episode 2 with the Battle of the Binary Stars and those episodes. But and it is a culmination of what's been happening for Burnham. But obviously, Georgiou has had her own issues because Burnham's no longer the pre-Mirror Universe. Burnham is no longer in there as well, and they have her coming together, and they've got to meet somewhere in the middle. And I find that fascinating too.
Yeah, I think we're so often kind of focalized through Burnham. She's the point of view character of Discovery. You have to remember that that Georgiou is kind of going, well, there's my side to this story. You're missing your version of me. I'm just as much missing my version of you. But you're all that's left. We are all that's left of that person that we will never get back. What I like about Mirror Georgiou is she's always completely straight. I'm not her. Yeah. I'm really not. I'm absolutely not. You're deluding yourself. It will never be that way. It will never be that way. It won't, and it isn't. Yeah. she keeps on coming back for more. Okay, all right, but and she's experiencing the same disappointment. Maybe she's hoping that she can corrupt. I'm sure that's always in her. I'm sure if I just explain myself a little bit more clearly, if I just offer you more riches, a bigger cloak, perhaps you will be persuaded to come and enjoy what I enjoyed with her in the past. But it's really sweetly done, really sort of nicely done, and the actors deliver it, because I can imagine you sit down with the script and you think, you know, I've had 8 years at Juilliard and I wanted to do Cleopatra. Okay, I'm playing the mirror universe mother figure of and you okay, well, what emotional truth do I find in this beyond all the kind of science fiction and science fantasy paraphernalia? And they just always nail it. They're really good. The three core ones in this, the line they tread between panto and between authenticity of emotion, it's just beautifully judged, I think.
And I think you're right with the, you know, each of them have lost an element of something that they want back, and what they want back isn't going to be the same. And I quite like that aspect of, you know, you can't have what you once had. It's things will be different, whether it be in a mirror universe or in normal life and such. And having that aspect of, yes, you've got Giorgio back now, but you know, she's not the Giorgio you expect. We find out obviously later on in the seasons just how different our new Giorgio is in Discovery. But it is interesting as well that, you know, if I move slightly onto Saru a little bit, because it links in quite well, that you know, you're saying that Michael Burnham can't let go. She can't let go. She has to physically hold on to her, which she does, and she transports over back into the Prime universe. But Saru's reaction is that of a man who's found his feet, because of especially in this episode with his, you know, he's almost like, you know, a line you expect from Kirk or expect from Picard or Cisco. He's bringing the crew together, saying this is their maiden voyage. This is what we are now. This is what Discovery is. And his arc over the last few episodes has been about him feeling not worthy of being a captain, that he doesn't feel his worth, that he was really upset with Michael with the loss of Giorgio, but he's found himself in a lot of ways. And then Giorgio pops up and he's like, what are you doing, kind of thing, which I really like. So what do you think to Saru, especially with that reaction? Because it is quite visceral. He does not like the transportation of Giorgio.
No, quite right too. She's absolute menace. She's absolutely a product of that. Yeah, it's a very, you know, for all the makeup and the height and the physicality of it, it's a very gentle and understated performance. And where everything else is being so broad brush, Saru is going on these very sort of small but steady steps. Yeah. Towards certainty and personal courage, and a sort of it's a very Trek story, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
It's somebody becoming the best that they can be within the supporting structure of Starfleet, and of course with Saru, it's a story of nature against nurture, because we're constantly being told this message of, you know, his instinct is to hide. His instinct is to experience the world as if he's being predated upon. But Starfleet is sort of giving the structures where he's kind of able to operate contrary to, you know, whatever chemicals or hormones are flooding his body every time, you know, somebody just walks up to him.
Yeah.
You know? So it's an interesting. It must be a lovely part to play, because it's so steadily growing in a certain direction, and it's an interesting part, and really well played.
I've said this as well for Discovery season 3, that we've had all the previous stars of the shows, you know, in Kirk, Spock and you know, Dr. Bones and whatever, but you've got Saru, Tilly and Michael, and they're really kind of forming this heart of the show, and it's not a surprise on me that a lot of the trailers are kind of focusing on those three characters, because the three very different characters, but they all bring something to it. And I know that this is not in our purview for talking about this so much, but this is the end of a Saru arc. But there is this issue between Michael doing things that Saru doesn't like, and, you know, we'll get an episode later on where they have to come across their differences and they actually find the love for each other and things. But it is interesting how they've kind of closed that arc off to a degree, that Saru is comfortable in his surroundings now, but there is things that will send him off on one, and obviously the stuff like the short treks and stuff, which really inform more of his history and stuff, which I really do appreciate. Right. Okay. So I just want to discuss maybe just more of a story narrative point then, because these stories that we've been basically talking about with Lorca, Burnham, and Lorca, Burnham, and Giorgio, but that's focusing. That's almost like the A story in a lot of ways, but to give Discovery something to do, we get this life universe changing situation of the mycelial spore network, that the ship is pulling out all its power, that the mycelial network will basically fall apart and be destroyed, and life as we know it in all types of universes will cease to exist. So it gives Discovery a chance to actually be involved in the story. First of all, what did you make to that story plot and its use here? Because it is literally life or death for the entire universe. So what did you make to that?
Well, storylines like that where the universe is at stake, this is one of these things where you go, well, the universe is not going to end.
Yeah.
So what is this story actually about? And the story about the mycelial network is the story of Stamets and Culber. Yeah. That's actually what that is about. So I'm kind of going, okay, right, they're gonna pull some kind of solution to universe ending out of the bag.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in is the emotional stakes of this story, which is the story that's happening in the foreground. Yeah. So I kind of go, all right, well, I'll tune in again to that story, my ears will prick up again when I hear the kind of, but we have done the XYZ that means that the ABC is okay. But what I actually want to watch is what's happening on Anthony Rapp's face. That's actually what I'm involved in, because what he is feeling is the universe ending. Yeah. And that is a kind of symbolic space against which this emotional journey is happening. So that's how I kind of relate to those sorts of stories. But we're a science fiction story, so why not have the universe ending? Kind of literalize what that emotional story is. So that's how I kind of respond to that. But at the same time, it's also about the emotional story is also one about repair, and you see that in the kind of small but delicate relationship between him and Tilly, which has come on in leaps and bounds. Some sort of trust, affection, a little bit of sniping, but mutuality. So that's what that story means to me. I think it's the Stamets-Culber, Stamets-Tilly relationship, I think.
Yeah. It's actually been a few weeks since I stopped watching. I'm on a few podcasts. I mean, Millennium, the Millennium podcast that I run, and we were talking about the end of season 2, actually, while I was thinking about this. And it's about the end of the season is actually about a plague that's going to end the world. And it ends in a particular way. But it's not about the plague. It's about the main character, Lance Henriksen's character's personal apocalypse. So it's very much in standing with that. And as you say, it's something that Stamets has to deal with, which I completely forgot, which leads me back to where I was, that I completely forgot that Stamets didn't know that Culber had died. When I watched this, I was like, I didn't, because I'd just had a few weeks distance from it. I totally forgot that he hadn't had that involved. And it's interesting that obviously Culber comes back and they have the conversation. It's all about following the music and almost like the grieving process, which is very quickly wrapped up in this episode. Just for this episode, I know there's obviously ramifications later on, but it is interesting how they develop that through that storyline.
Yeah, I think they've got more beats to go on that journey. Yeah, but they've started the process of repair, I think. So yeah, and then you have to see where it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean the action pieces. Just a couple of things on the action pieces before we kind of wrap up the story. But I absolutely love the fact that Giorgio's kick is incredible. The one that goes over. It's amazing. I do think that the fight scenes, the one in the corridor where they were facing off each other, was really effective. And obviously the fight scene, which kind of mirrors what happened at the end of Binary Stars, works really well. And then, as I say, the collection of Discovery kind of finding their way to being, okay, we've taken a season to find ourselves. We are now here. Let's jump back to where we were. Because in some ways, you could almost get rid of the 4 episodes here and just jump into, we've ended up 9 months in the future with Lorca on board. You could have easily done that, but they didn't. And I appreciate that. But the way that the story rolls around to that, and season 1 is basically the almost like the primer, the very kind of pilot episode, but just stretched over a season. So where it ends up going from here is really interesting. But what did you make to the kind of the final elements as we draw to a close of the episode?
Oh, it's another whiplash, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's sort of, whoa, hang on a minute, 5 weeks ago, like I say, this was tardigrades. What's going on here? And then bam, mirror universe, and then bam, you're straight back into something completely different again. So it's very Voyager, isn't it? You think you've got a grip on the story, and you're whiplashed into something completely different. Oh my God! Right? No, we should be coming home in triumph now. Holy moly! Look at that war map.
Yeah, it's not Voyager returning to Earth, is it?
By no means. No. There's no Barclay with bunting out.
But it is interesting that, because I remember watching this at the time and going, they've got 2 episodes now. All of a sudden, with 9 months ahead, how are they going to solve that over like a 2-episode arc? So. But it is, you do feel that whiplash, and it's something I feel like I've got today, to be honest. I've got a bit of a sore neck. But,
dear.
Yeah, so I feel that pain.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think I've covered everything. But is there anything that you feel that I may have missed that you want to bring up?
Tilly's straight hair.
Okay.
That's the last we... I think I saw a review somewhere saying a great unanswered question of this is how Tilly goes so quickly from straight hair to curly. So
it's an amazing piece of hair.
it's really outstanding. So she always looks fantastic. But I love the straight hair look on her, and I love the curls. So, we had to mention Tilly, and as ever, she's lovely. So,
she is, and obviously she gets a spore on her shoulder, which will come into play later. But,
indeed, it will. Yeah.
So we'll wait and see as we develop and as we look over those episodes how it goes.
Yeah.
But thank you very much, Una, for coming on.
My pleasure.
At the moment, where can people find you online if they want to talk to you further about Star Trek or anything else? And what have you got in the pipeline?
I'm almost exclusively on Twitter, where people can just see me being a bit bad-tempered, to be honest.
You've got your little Garrick as well, remember? I know he can't go anywhere at the moment, which is a shame.
He can't go in. No, he's sitting on the side going, you haven't taken me for coffee even in ages, so I might have to stage him going around the house or something. I should have done some Garrick in lockdown. I missed a trick there. But we just come back from a fantastic trip in LA, me and Garrick, so before lockdown happened. So people can find me on Twitter. I've got my website, Una McCormack.co.uk, which has sort of just been refreshed, and all my books and stuff are on there. And I'm doing this tiny letter that I mentioned. If people are interested, they can. I put that out every Sunday night, and people can subscribe to it if they're interested, or just watch out for the tweet on a Sunday night. So I usually post something. So that's mostly where I am. The next big thing coming out that people will be interested in was surely going to be the autobiography of Catherine Janeway, which is coming out in September from Titan, and that's her first person. It sort of takes the conceit is that I'm sort of the editor rather than the author, but I am the author. And it takes you from I was born in a small Midwest farming town right the way to sort of the Admiral, and hopefully it's really good fun. I had a lot of fun with that. I finished the Picard book, which has been very intense and epic. And then kind of immersed myself in old school Trek, and went off and did this book. So hopefully people will really enjoy that, kind of tying in with the anniversary and stuff. So that's not long now. Where are we?
We're coming up to July.
September.
Okay.
Yeah. So not long. Yeah. So that's the next big thing I think people should look out for.
Well, no doubt. I mean, we both live in the UK, so we know that Voyager often turns up on sci-fi and during the days and things like that. But it's definitely something that I would probably go back to while reading that book. So I'll be looking forward to that.
It's all up on Netflix, so you can watch it there if you're on Netflix.
Oh yeah, I'm on Netflix.
Yeah, all there.
I'll stream it. I've got to be on everything now because obviously Picard being on Amazon, so you've got to be everywhere. Yeah. We don't know where Lower Decks and what else? Lower Decks and season 3 of Discovery will be on Netflix, obviously. So
The only thing I can't get is because I'm completely streaming services now. I can't get talking pics, which is a big loss to his household. But yeah. Otherwise, pretty much everything.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Tony alluded to this last time you were on that I received your Picard book. It's just up there actually. And it arrived at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I put it down at 8 o'clock at night, and finally finished it because that was the only day I had a chance to read it before reviewing it. So it was great. So I spent a full day with your writing, which was fantastic.
Oh, bad luck! That's
I know it's great. But if anyone's after myself, you can find me on Twitter. My handle is @rmuldrake. That's RMULDRAKE. Obviously, Make It So. It's the podcast that we're currently on at the moment. And you can find me on I mentioned the Millennium TV show as well. You can find me on that. We'll be in season 3 by the time this comes out. And that is at The Time Is Now pod. And I will now be show running the Xcast, which is the X-Files podcast, along with Carl Sweeney and Sarah L. Blair, with Tony looking down from above and letting us control that for a few seasons. So plenty for to get hold of me. I'm also just started not Star Trek. I've just started a Red Dwarf podcast as well. So we are going through Red Dwarf episode by episode and looking forward to a 3-part documentary series coming up in the summer, in August, at the time of recording this, which is summer 2020. So those are the best places to find me. But again, Una, thank you very much for coming on. It's much appreciated. And we'll hopefully see you on the podcast or the network in some form or other in the future. So thank you for that.
So too. My pleasure. Thank you.
We'll invite you on. We'll talk about Catherine Janeway potentially. That might be a good one to go for. But until next time, everyone, engage.
Elsewhere on We Made This. We buy records.
The very idea of not indicating this is a reissue from this year, we would always write on the label the year if it's a reissue. If it's come in to us second hand, you'd have to be a real shitbag, wouldn't you, to put in a Smith's record and not point out actually this is the reissue from a couple of years ago.
Yeah, no, you would have to be. But we've seen all sorts of dodgy practices, so I wouldn't put it past someone to try it or to deliberately do that.
People are awful.
They are.
Motion pictures.
For that character, the character he plays, Norman, is someone who's held in such high regard by his friends, decades after the fact, isn't he? By his colleagues from the army, and they go back to find this gold and to pay their respects to him and stuff. You needed somebody who could kind of make that work, somebody who had the charisma to really pull that off with just a few scenes, and I think he had that, and I think in a sad way though, I watched that film for the second time Saturday night, and
that was played really differently now. My God, yeah.
Retrospectively, it's made even more poignant because, like his character, he's not gonna, he's gonna forever be in our minds as a man about that age. He's not gonna be able to grow old like his friends in the film did.
Amazing.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast.
If you're trying to roll under something on 2d6, your average on 2d6 is 7. So if you've got a skill at, say, 2 and a main stat at 2, you're going to be trying to roll a 4 or under on 2d6. That's a really quite tricky roll. And 2 and 2 is not necessarily a bad stat in this game either. Stats are quite low.
Yeah, they did seem to be that, yeah.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network. Make It So, a Star Trek Universe podcast, was created and is produced and hosted by Tony Black and Kurt North. You can find the show on Twitter at Jean-Luc Podard and on Facebook in the Make It So, a Star Trek podcast fan group discussion group. Check out the We Made This network at We Made This Pod on Twitter and on Facebook by typing in We Made This, and you can find all of our shows on our website, wemadethispod.com. Thanks for listening.